Chapter 381, An Inexplicable Connection. Thinking of this, Anduin instinctively pulled out the wand from his waist and injected some magic into it, causing it to emit a weak electric current. Upon seeing the wand in Anduin's hand and the faint but potent electric arc, the Thunderbird instantly became more excited and began to cry loudly. However, this time, the cry was different. Anduin could sense the joy conveyed by it. "Quiet," Anduin whispered, simultaneously activating the thinking rune with his wand. He cast a wave of magic, integrating his voice into it. In the minds of everyone present, the word quiet resonated, not as a direct word, but as a concept, as if someone had shouted it in their minds. This allowed them to instantly understand Anduin's command. Newt and the two directors were taken aback by this display of skill. How could this young man possess such advanced techniques? After hearing Anduin's command and understanding its meaning, the Thunderbird immediately closed its beak, crouched down, and looked at Anduin quietly. Anduin was overjoyed to find that the Thunderbird could understand him. He had only been experimenting by combining his thoughts, words, and thinking magic to facilitate communication, and it had worked on the first try. Seeing the Thunderbird calm down, Anduin nodded to Newt and the two directors, signaling that they could continue their work. Bianca then commanded the crowd in an orderly manner, arranging for them to move and disperse all the cages using the floating spell, but without directly releasing the magical animals inside. Releasing them directly could cause confusion and make it difficult to care for them, as Mr. Scamander had specifically explained. During this period, Anduin stayed with the Thunderbird. They noticed that with Anduin by its side, the Thunderbird remained peaceful. However, once Anduin moved away, the Thunderbird became restless. "Anduin, it seems this Thunderbird has an inexplicable connection with you," Newt observed, glancing between Anduin and the Thunderbird. "I think it might have something to do with my wand. The core of my wand is a Thunderbird feather. When I took out the wand, it seemed to recognize it," Anduin replied, still watching the Thunderbird. Perhaps due to Anduin's presence, the Thunderbird had slowly closed its eyes and fallen asleep. "So that's the case. The connection between us is indeed profound. I remember that Mr. Ollivander's only wand made with Thunderbird feathers was crafted from the feathers I provided," Newt said with a light smile, a touch of emotion in his voice. "I remember that too," Anduin nodded slightly. He recalled Mr. Ollivander mentioning it when he handed him the dark painting. "This wand has been incredibly helpful to me. It seems I owe you a thank you, Mr. Scamander." "Haha, it's a coincidence that our fates are connected through these feathers. You must have a very close bond with your wand, which is why this Thunderbird noticed," Newt said, laughing at the serendipity of their connection. Anduin nodded silently, acknowledging the close bond he shared with Dark Painting. Because of this bond, he had been able to subdue Wild Thunder so easily. It was time to find a way to further enhance his armament, Dark Painting. Thinking of this, Anduin couldn't help but recall that plan, which had been stalled due to insufficient resources. Now it seemed like the right time to reconsider it. The Thunderbird with the silver spear was still on the run, and if he truly wanted to defeat it, he needed to improve his strength as soon as possible. However, Anduin hesitated. While he had enough materials, his knowledge and experience in alchemy were still lacking. He needed to accumulate more knowledge. With this in mind, Anduin glanced at Newt again. The kettle in Newt's hand intrigued him, and he wondered if he could find an opportunity to study it. "What's wrong, Anduin? Is there something on my face?" Newt asked, noticing Anduin's strange look. "Ah, no," Anduin replied, quickly thinking of a quest tie-in to cover his curiosity. "I wanted to ask how these captured magical animals will be handled. There are many precious and protected species here, like long-horned water snakes, venomous leopards, griffins, and of course, this Thunderbird." Newt smiled, thinking he understood Anduin's concern. "You want to know about the Thunderbird," he said. "The Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures has special breeding areas for magical animals. Common magical animals will be well taken care of there, such as rune horses and soundbirds. For rare species that are difficult to raise or seldom seen, they are usually handed over to institutions that cooperate with the Ministry of Magic or to magizoologists. For example, creatures like unicorns, Tebow warthogs, thestrals, and hippogriffs are often sent directly to Hogwarts. They have a well-organized fauna, and Professor Kettleburn is a very responsible wizard. However, most of the magical animals rescued today are unique species from America. British magizoologists generally lack experience in caring for them, so it's likely they will be sent to me, Newt added with a slight smile. As a legendary wizard who had traveled the world, Newt's expertise in breeding magical animals was unparalleled. The Ministry of Magic often entrusted him with species they had never encountered before. As Newt had predicted, Bianca soon approached him, expressing the Ministry's hope that he could take in the magical animals, except for the rune horse and the soundbird. Naturally, Newt agreed. The Ministry staff loaded the magical animals into a vehicle, which would transport them directly to Scamander's house. Bianca even accompanied them, indicating the Ministry's high regard for these animals and their concern for their safe transport. End of this chapter. Chapter 382, Azalea's Explosive Mentality. At this time, after accepting the commission from the Ministry of Magic, Newt turned to look at Anduin. Anduin, why don't you come to my place later? This Thunderbird seems to be comfortable only around you. With you watching over it during the journey, things are less likely to go wrong. Also, you mentioned wanting to take in that vampire Bianca. She'll be with me, so you can discuss it with her then. It's not convenient now, as he's too slow. Newt continued, in order to repay your previous help, we also hope to find an opportunity to show our gratitude. I'll show you my collection later. If you're interested in anything or have any requests, don't hesitate to let me know. Newt expressed his goodwill towards Anduin, admiring the outstanding young man before him. Anduin thought for a moment and then readily agreed. No problem. I can also learn from you how to take care of these precious magical animals. While the two of them were chatting, Azalea, who had been like an invisible person on the other side, stayed by Bianca's side, feeling conflicted. She was very flustered, knowing that she hadn't even been aware of the Silver Spear's operation this time. By the time she received the notification to support the front line, the battle was basically over. Moreover, a Silver Spear member had died at the scene. Although she didn't know this person, she knew that anyone participating in such a large-scale operation must have a high status in the department. When she saw the large expanse of fierce fire burning at the scene, Azalea realized that the Operation Thunderbird was also involved. But how could this be possible? An operation involving Thunderbird had failed, and so thoroughly. More than 20 collaborators were wiped out, 2 Silver Spear members died, and among them was the famous Thunderbird, even in the club. But the facts were right in front of her eyes. Just looking at the large number of captured magical animals, Azalea knew that the Silver Spear had suffered a heavy loss this time. If so many goods were stored in the past, it would take at least a year to deliver. Transporting living things requires people, and even the black market collaborators who work with them can hardly get so many people to escort the goods at one time. This time, the escort was definitely a big deal. After seeing the number of smugglers at the scene, she understood that they must be all the personnel of one or several black market collaborators in the Americas. Now that these people have been killed, it is not only their British branch that has suffered heavy losses. So now, the most embarrassed person was Azalea herself. She suspected that she was the only Silver Spear member left in the whole of the UK. What should she do next? What would she say if the people at the headquarters held her accountable? She was completely in the dark. The punishment for mission failure within the Silver Spear is very severe. But the problem now is that she didn't even know if she had participated in this mission. The person in charge of her booth was the arrogant Thunderbird. This wasn't the first time he had carried out a mission without revealing any information to her, but when reporting to the headquarters, he would include her. If the mission was successful, she could make meritorious service for nothing, but if it failed, she would be blamed for no reason. But no matter what happened before, Thunderbird was still there, and she could complain to the headquarters if she was dissatisfied. But now, even Thunderbird was gone, and she didn't even know his current whereabouts. If the headquarters sent someone to ask her what happened, she wouldn't have an answer. Azalea found herself in a predicament. To handle her responsibilities at the club, she actively sought out information, hoping to understand the situation better. She even volunteered to join the firefighting team. As she helped extinguish the flames, her anxiety grew. What kind of enemies had Thunderbird faced to cause such widespread fire, forcing him to flee? Despite her efforts, she learned nothing beyond the fact that the wizards who confronted Thunderbird were incredibly powerful. Everyone remained tight-lipped, unwilling to share any details. Feeling mentally exhausted, Azalea approached Newt and Anduin with a blank expression. "Mr. Scamander, we are ready for the consignment of the goods. Director Bianca asked me to check if you are prepared to go." As Bianca's secretary, Azalea knew she would likely be up all night. Newt smiled wryly. "Ready so soon?" Bianca's efficiency is higher than expected. He then turned to Anduin. "How about you? Are you ready?" "No problem. I haven't experienced the starry sky late at night for a long time," Anduin replied with a slight smile, pulling out his broomstick. He preferred not to use his flying cloak in front of everyone. Azalea glanced at Anduin in surprise, trying to understand Newt's intention of having Anduin accompany them. Why was Anduin involved in today's operation? Wasn't he the owner and alchemist of Silver Flash Trading Company, here to provide technical support like Mr. Scamander? Newt's presence made sense due to the magical animals needing care, but if there was an issue with the alchemy equipment, it could simply be replaced. Could Anduin be connected to the earlier battle? Azalea quickly dismissed the thought. Although she wasn't fully aware of Thunderbird's capabilities, she knew he was formidable. Anduin, a young wizard and recognized alchemist, couldn't have participated in the battle. Moreover, he appeared unscathed, his clothes immaculate, showing no signs of combat. Chiding herself for her paranoia, Azalea realized she had been unnerved by the situation. She couldn't believe she had suspected Anduin's involvement. Anduin, noticing her confusion, gave her a teasing look. He didn't trust the Ministry of Magic's secrecy and knew Azalea needed to be dealt with quickly to prevent any future complications. End of this chapter. Chapter 383, Indoor Zoo. The journey from Northern Ireland to Southern England was not a short one. Anduin, along with more than a dozen people from the Ministry of Magic, flew overnight and finally arrived at Scamander's house in the early hours of the morning. Tina, who had returned via apparition ahead of time, was already there to welcome everyone. Fortunately, wizards have robust physiques, nourished by magic, so no one was overly fatigued, except for Shaltir. Because it was daytime, she transformed into a bat and slipped into Anduin's arms. According to Shaltir, although vampires detest sunlight, they do not perish upon exposure. The effects depend on their strength and the intensity of the sunlight. When exposed to strong sunlight, a vampire's skin experiences a stinging and burning sensation, followed by redness, rashes, and severe peeling, which can be quite alarming. The exposed skin becomes their most vulnerable area, akin to a burn. However, during cloudy weather or at dawn and dusk, when the sunlight is not as intense, traveling is manageable, though still uncomfortable. The skin itches and stings, requiring care afterward. Some powerful vampires can even move freely in midday sun, but Shaltir was not among them. Thus, she instinctively sought to hide from the sun's heat. During the journey, Anduin discussed Shaltir with Bianca, who was very pleased. Bianca knew of Anduin's strength and had no issue with him vouching for a vegetarian vampire. Anduin, now a supplier for the Ministry of Magic, would collaborate more closely with them after this incident. Doing a favor for the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures was beneficial. Anduin had visited Scamander's house before, but only the front part. To him, Newt's house resembled the burrow, oddly shaped, but still a relatively normal place. He was surprised to find a hidden area. Newt led everyone to the back of the house, where there was a double door resembling a ranch stable gate. Once inside, Anduin saw what could only be described as a real indoor zoo. The area spanned several kilometers, with a simulated sky on the ceiling, created using a large weather blanket. The ceiling appeared to be at least tens of meters high. Dozens of large compartments, similar to small zoo areas, were neatly separated by weather blankets. Each compartment simulated different natural environments and weather conditions. Anduin saw runespore cows sleeping soundly on a green grassland and mooncalves arranged in a jungle under a simulated starry sky. He even saw a large lake with colorful grindylows breathing beneath its clear surface. Anduin and the Ministry of Magic staff looked around in awe, like children entering a grand amusement park. The peaceful coexistence of so many magical animals under one roof was simply unbelievable. Anduin was particularly astonished. Besides the variety of magical animals, the layout of the venue caught his attention. Expanding such a large area with the untraceable extension charm was no small feat. Normally, casting the untraceable extension charm could create temporary space, but making space props that lasted longer and had a large enough area required more than just spell casting. There are two key points that cannot be avoided: materials and magic power. The areas that can be expanded by high-quality materials vary in size, but sufficient magic power can ensure the stability of the space. For example, Anduin's space ring is made of goblin ulim steel, which is currently the best material for expansion space. It can hold hundreds of cubic spaces inside, but regularly draws magic power from Anduin to maintain it. To expand into such a large space in front of him, Anduin judged that the formation of the untraceable stretching curse must not be made of ulim steel, but constructed from one of the top 3 materials suitable for carrying spells. This is a significant undertaking, and Anduin thought that even if he used all the remaining ulim steel in his possession, he would not be able to create such a RGE space. Moreover, the sky and walls here are all covered with weather blankets, a specialty of Cairo, Egypt, which you can't even buy in the U. So now, in Anduin's eyes, in addition to the labels of legendary wizard and magizoologist, Newt also has an aura of immense wealth. How rich must he be to make his home so extravagant? At this time, Newt, unaware of Anduin's thoughts, was silently leading the group to uncover the weather blanket in a compartment. He then turned around and said, "This is a mountainous jungle environment. Let's put those 2 venomous leopards in here. Be sure to cast a bubblehead charm on yourself when you release them, otherwise it will be bad if you get hurt by the poisonous gas they spit out." "Just put them in like this? Aren't you afraid they'll get out?" an Auror asked Newt in surprise. "Heh, don't worry. There are confundus charms arranged here, and they will be magically suggested to return when they reach the edge. I've learned from past experiences with magical animals and have prepared for this," Newt grinned, as if recalling some amusing memories. "Okay, Mr. Scamander, we understand," the staff of the Ministry of Magic said, feeling relieved after hearing this. They then released the 2 venomous leopards. The leopards were in good condition among this group of magical animals, with no injuries. As long as they were given enough food and rest, they would recover soon. Newt then took everyone to place the magical animals one by one, giving instructions on how to comfort them. For instance, the 3-headed dog could be put to sleep peacefully just by playing music. At the same time, Newt carefully explained to Anduin and the people from the Department of Management and Control of Magical Beasts how to check the bodies of these high-risk large creatures, deal with their injuries, and more. During this period, Newt personally demonstrated to everyone how to feed the animals, wipe their bodies, clean and disinfect wounds, and how to avoid attacks from excited animals when applying therapeutic potions. He was like a dedicated teacher of magical animal protection, and Anduin and the others studied diligently beside him. Under Newt's arrangement, everyone at the scene was also divided into several groups for nursing and treatment. End of this chapter. Chapter 384, Sniff, Seeking Monthly Ticket Recommendation. Anduin was naturally assigned to take care of the Thunderbird. The Thunderbird was in a very poor condition with many scars on its body. After Newt's inspection, it was also found that there were multiple fractures, which required bone correction and reduction. The reason for its severe injuries might have been due to the Thunderbird's strong nature. It must have resisted fiercely when the smugglers were hunting it, leading to such brutal treatment. Fortunately, under Anduin's care, the Thunderbird was the most peaceful among the magical animals receiving treatment. Even the pain caused by the bone corrections only elicited a few mournful cries, without any overreaction. After a busy half-day, Anduin finally wiped the sweat from his brow, feeling a sense of relief. The wounds on the Thunderbird had been treated for inflammation, bandages applied, and splints fixed on the fractured parts of its body. The Thunderbird finally fell asleep peacefully after careful care and feeding. "You just rest here, and I will come to see you again when I have time." Anduin gently stroked the feathers on the Thunderbird's head. The sleeping Thunderbird seemed to hear Anduin's words and let out a comfortable, crisp beep. After spending the day together, Anduin's bond with the Thunderbird grew stronger, and his hostility towards the silver spear that injured it intensified. After finishing all this, Anduin left the compartment where the Thunderbird was placed. By this time, most of the Ministry of Magic staff had completed the care of the magical animals and began to evacuate back to the Ministry in an orderly manner. Anduin was left behind by Newt, who invited him to his residence. To be honest, the layout of Newt's house was quite messy. It didn't feel as tidy as the Magic Zoo area. The surrounding ground was littered with stacks of books, materials, and various bottles and jars. Oil paintings depicting magical animals added a strong historical atmosphere. However, this slightly chaotic environment added a lot of life to Newt's house. Anduin also discovered that many magical animals lived in Newt's house. There was a bowtruckle staring at him as soon as he entered, with a silly expression on its face, and 3 Kneazles running around underfoot. There were also a few bowtruckles playing on the potted plants in the living room. But what caught Anduin's eye the most was a Niffler. The moment he entered Newt's living room, it jumped on top of him from a height. When the Niffler saw him, it was like a cat seeing a mouse. It swished to Anduin's shoulder, bent down, and tried to grab the silver brooch on Anduin's chest, desperately pulling it into its arms. However, this money-grubbing Niffler had picked the wrong target. As soon as it grabbed the brooch, a faint aura burst out, and a transparent iron armor protective shield instantly appeared. This scene directly shocked the Niffler, and the protective shield bounced it into the air, sending it flying far away. "Naz, didn't we agree not to cause trouble? Look at you." Newt raised his hand lightly, stopping the Niffler in midair. He then retracted his palm and gently tapped the Niffler's head. Turning to Anduin with an apologetic expression, he said, "I'm sorry, this is Naz. He's usually naughty and can't resist shiny things. I hope he didn't scare you." "It's me who should apologize," Anduin replied with a smile, squinting his eyes. He had a good impression of these small animals. "I forgot to deactivate the protective charm on my brooch. I almost hurt this little guy." With that, Anduin took off the brooch and put it in front of the Niffler, who looked at it with wide, curious eyes. Natsu, like a playful cat, kept teasing the little guy. Watching Shishi repeatedly reach for the silver brooch, only to miss it by a hair, was quite amusing to him. "Hey, come on, stop playing. Tina has prepared a big lunch for us. You've been busy all night and all morning. You must be starving. Come, follow me into the dining room," Newt said, smiling as he noticed how well Anduin and Natsu were getting along. Anduin nodded with a smile and followed Newt inside. "You two stayed up all night and didn't complain about being tired. How can I, a young man, have the nerve to call myself tired? I feel bad for troubling Mrs. Scamander," he said politely. "It's nothing to be embarrassed about," Tina said as she brought out a bowl of delicious pasta from the kitchen and placed it on the table. "Newt told me about you. You saved Rove at a critical moment, so you're our friend. Please, sit down. My cooking is average, but I hope you don't mind." Tina removed her apron and invited them to sit down for lunch. To Anduin's surprise, all the magical animals living in Newt's house rushed into the dining room and climbed onto the table, ready to eat with them. Anduin was curious about their unique living habits and asked, "By the way, where is Rove? Doesn't he live with you?" "After the last incident, Tina and I were worried about his safety, so we sent him back to his parents. We don't know if the silver spear will take any new actions," Newt explained while stuffing food into his mouth. Anduin nodded in agreement. It would be irresponsible to keep the child around when a criminal organization was targeting them. He then had a very special lunch, surrounded by a bunch of magical animals. After the meal, Newt took Anduin to his study. The room was filled with various bottles, books, furs, and even potions, all randomly placed in true Newt style. Anduin, Newt said, guiding him to sit on the sofa and pouring him a glass of butterbeer. To be honest, I only heard about your deeds from Professor Kettleburn. I thought you were just another brilliant Hogwarts student. I just learned from the Ministry of Magic today that you actually opened an alchemy business and are also an equipment supplier for the Ministry. You are really young and promising, Newt continued. Thank you. I am just lucky. I owe a lot to the guidance of Professor Burns and Professor Flitwick. I am honored to be able to help you. You must know that my current textbook is still written by you, Anduin replied, taking a sip of his butterbeer. End of this chapter. Chapter 385, Bloodline Contract. With me, you don't need to be so restrained, Newt said, admiring the young man in front of him. Anduin had always acted too gentlemanly, which made Newt feel as if there was some secret hidden within him. However, Newt never liked to pry into his friend's details. Based on Anduin's behavior and the evaluations from the Ministry of Magic and Hogwarts professors, he seemed trustworthy. Sorry, I'm too reserved, Anduin replied, shaking his head helplessly. He had always demanded Slytherin students to uphold the standard of elegance and self-restraint, and thus he had long demanded the same of himself. He always maintained a polite attitude when dealing with people. Don't apologize all the time. To be honest, you are the first Hogwarts student to visit my place. Just don't think my place is messy, Newt said with a smile. He then looked at Anduin. After all, you have helped us a lot in the past, and Tina and I will repay you well. Tell me, what do you like here, or do you need any help? You are welcome to ask. Newt expected Anduin, who had always been very modest, to be polite. However, he was taken aback when Anduin's response was rather direct. To be honest, I really want something from you, but I don't know if you are willing to part with it, Anduin said, squinting his eyes and looking at Newt with a smile. Oh? Tell me, Newt responded, curious about Anduin's sudden directness. This change made him a little unresponsive. Could it be that this young man was also interested in his suitcase? How should he respond to such a request? I am very interested in your knowledge, especially the knowledge related to alchemy and magical animals. I don't know if you are willing to satisfy my curiosity, Anduin said, looking around apologetically. Knowing that Newt wanted to repay him, Anduin decided not to be humble. He knew that Newt was a super rich man, but after his alchemy business got on the right track, he was not short of money. Materials could be bought with gold galleons, but treasured knowledge and materials sometimes couldn't be bought with money. Knowledge? Ha ha ha! Newt froze for a moment at Anduin's request. He had thought the young man had taken a fancy to his possessions. Newt looked at Anduin with more admiration. He didn't expect this young man to be quite a pure scholar. No problem, Newt nodded affirmatively. Someone being interested in what I've learned makes me happy. If these academic materials are not passed on, they will become a pile of waste paper. Spreading the protection of magical animals to the Wizarding Society has always been my ideal. However, Newt continued, looking at Anduin strangely, I have made some achievements in magical animals, but in alchemy, my level may not be as good as yours. I don't have much alchemy knowledge to share. The learning of alchemy sometimes does not need to rely on materials, Anduin smiled slightly. I have seen a lot of things worth learning from you, such as the weather blanket in your zoo area, the entire park itself, and even the kettle you used to extinguish fiend fire. I see. You want to study these alchemy props here. Newt nodded with a smile, then took out the metal water bottle. But this travel water bottle was given to me by Dumbledore. I don't know if it is convenient to lend it to you directly. Well, come and find me whenever you are free. All the materials in my library can be open to you. At the same time, if you don't understand anything about magizoology, you can ask me. If you need a travel bottle, you can also study it with me. Of course, the premise is that you handle it with care, Newt concluded. Just make sure you don't break it, otherwise I won't be able to explain it to the principal, Newt Scamander cautioned. Anduin's face lit up with joy. Thank you, Mr. Scamander. This arrangement is perfect. It means I can visit the Thunderbird often. Newt nodded approvingly. A love for magical creatures is the foundation of learning magizoology. That Thunderbird seems to have a strong affinity with you. With your company, I believe it will recover quickly. He paused, as if a thought had just struck him. By the way, can you establish a direct connection with the Thunderbird? Direct connection? Anduin echoed, puzzled. I did feel an inexplicable bond when I first saw the Thunderbird. It might be related to my wand. I have a very close connection with it, and I think that's why I could connect with the Thunderbird. He hesitated before asking, why? Is there something wrong with that? Newt rubbed his chin thoughtfully. If you can truly sense the Thunderbird, you might be of great help. When you visit, try to perceive the Thunderbird from a distance to see if you can sense its presence. Your current relationship with the Thunderbird is very similar to the early stages of a bloodline contract. Bloodline contract? Anduin repeated, recalling the term from his studies on Tonk's transformation magus, though he knew little about it. Yes, Newt began, searching for the right words. You know that Dumbledore has a phoenix, right? His family has a bloodline contract with the Phoenix family, making Fawkes Dumbledore's close companion. They can communicate and sense each other's presence over long distances. I've heard of that, Anduin said, but could my connection with the Thunderbird be similar to a bloodline contract? I've never signed any contract with the Thunderbird family. I only encountered the Thunderbird for the first time yesterday. Bloodline contracts don't manifest until they are signed, Newt explained. Many powerful magical creatures will only sign contracts with intelligent beings they feel a strong affinity for or are very close to. Therefore, before the contract is signed, there is already a connection. This is the early manifestation of a bloodline contract. And only wizards who exhibit this kind of connection can sign bloodline contracts with these magical creatures. The contract itself deepens the relationship between them. The two are complementary. There must be a spiritual connection in line with the bloodline contract before the contract can be signed, rather than a spiritual connection forming after the contract is signed. This is a crucial difference, which is why so few wizards in the magical society have bloodline contracts. Newt, an expert in magazoology, explained in great detail. End of this chapter. Chapter 386, Another Thunderbird. Oh, so, if I develop a relationship with the Thunderbird, I might have the opportunity to deepen this connection? Does that mean I could potentially sign a blood contract with a Thunderbird? Anduin suddenly realized. Newt nodded. Yes, if your connection with the Thunderbird can be further improved, there is indeed a chance you could establish a blood contract with the Thunderbird family. However, there are certain prerequisites for this. What kind of conditions? Anduin asked eagerly, imagining the possibility of having a powerful magical creature as a partner, much like Dumbledore with his phoenix. The establishment of a bloodline contract between a wizard and a Thunderbird is a two-way choice and requires corresponding strength as support. Both parties must meet two conditions, a sufficiently close spiritual connection and strong magical power and sensitivity, Newt explained. Oh, you mean? Anduin began to understand, but wasn't entirely sure. Yes, to be honest, your strength is impressive, but I can't accurately judge if it meets the standard for a blood contract. Even if it doesn't, the difference isn't significant. It's just a matter of time. However, the Thunderbird you rescued is currently in its prime and doesn't have the strength to support a bloodline contract, Newt continued. Generally, when a wizard establishes a bloodline contract with a magical creature, they do so with the leader of the group, and then select a partner from within the group. If you have such an idea, you might need to find a more powerful Thunderbird leader who can recognize you. I don't know much about the specific process of signing a bloodline contract, but I do know that blindly signing a contract with a magical creature of insufficient strength can have terrible consequences. According to legend, in ancient times, a wizard wanted to sign a blood contract with the giant family. Because he wasn't recognized by the giant leader, he signed a contract with an ordinary giant, resulting in mutations on both sides. It's rumored that the Troll clan was born this way. Newt, having never seen a wizard with a blood connection to magical animals, speculated that the Dumbledore family had signed a contract with a phoenix group in their ancestry, making them beneficiaries. He could only reference known records and explain to Anduin, unable to provide specific advice. Anduin would have to explore the details himself. So that's how it is. Anduin felt a chill down his spine after hearing Newt's explanation. He had hoped to become a Thunderbird Knight, but hadn't expected the blood contract to have such significant hidden dangers. No wonder he had never seen anyone other than Dumbledore with a bloodline contract creature. It required a strong enough magical creature. This meant that some magical creatures inherently couldn't sign a bloodline contract due to their lack of strength. However, after thinking it over, Anduin realized it made sense. If any creature could establish a spiritual connection and sign a blood contract, he would have been the first to sign with a T-bow warthog. He was proficient in hundreds of cooking methods for T-bow warthog and was a professional pig breeder in the Hogwarts Magical Zoo area. The T-bow warthogs on the outskirts of the Forbidden Forest were all on good terms with him, yet none had established a spiritual connection with him. But fortunately, Anduin had a new goal and a clearer understanding of the path ahead. He hadn't known much about blood contracts before, and he certainly hadn't been foolish enough to attack a T-bow warthog. Otherwise, there might have been another race like the second brother in the wizarding world. So, if I want to sign a blood contract with the Thunderbird clan, I need to find a more powerful leader of their clan? Anduin asked, still keen on the idea of becoming a Thunderbird Knight and actively considering other possibilities. Theoretically, yes, Newt replied. But before that, you need to establish a good relationship with that Thunderbird. Although the Thunderbird family is closely related to the Phoenix, their habitat has always been in North America. Years ago, I rescued a Thunderbird from the hands of the Silver Spear and released it in the United States. If you have such thoughts, you might need to go to North America. Newt seemed to be reminded of a wonderful memory, a smile curling at the corners of his mouth. When he regained his senses, he looked at Anduin again. But what I want to tell you isn't just about the blood contract. It's not? Anduin asked curiously, then remembered. Oh, right. You mentioned something about how I could help when my spiritual connection with the Thunderbird deepens. Yes, Newt confirmed with a nod. If you can truly communicate with the Thunderbird remotely, you might have a chance to recover another Thunderbird for us. Another Thunderbird? Anduin frowned, quickly recalling the incident from half a year ago when the Ministry of Magic got a clue about the Silver Spear and transported a Thunderbird. You mean the one that was transported away half a year ago? He asked tentatively. Exactly, Newt said, pleased with Anduin's quick thinking. After the Ministry of Magic's pursuit failed last time, I was asked for help. I remember Bianca sent that young and beautiful secretary to find me. They hoped I could identify some feathers picked up from smuggling routes. I could tell at a glance that they belonged to a Thunderbird. And I can confirm that it was a juvenile Thunderbird, Newt continued. Maybe that Thunderbird is related to the one we rescued yesterday. The Rachis structure is very similar, and the juvenile ptarmigan is probably the child of the one in the park. So, if I can establish remote sensing with the Thunderbird, I might also be able to sense the location of that juvenile Thunderbird. Anduin suddenly understood why Newt valued the spiritual connection between him and the Thunderbird so much. Exactly, Newt said. It might be useless if the Thunderbirds are from different clan branches, but they are likely to be blood relatives. If you can establish a connection with this Thunderbird, you may have the opportunity to trace the blood relationship to the other one. Newt wasn't entirely sure, but this was his judgment based on years of academic experience. Chapter 387, The Order of Merlin. But Anduin looked at Newt with some uncertainty. Isn't that baby Thunderbird already transported away? It's probably not in the UK anymore. If we want to find it, we might have to go to Europe. And it's been such a long time, we can't be sure if the juvenile Thunderbird has been resold. What if the Silver Spear has already sold the Thunderbird to other continents? Anduin had no complaints about dealing with the Silver Spear, but he felt it was a waste of time to spend so much effort on something with no visible results. You're thinking it through well, Newt nodded in agreement, but immediately explained. But what you don't know is that the Silver Spear, an organization that hunts and smuggles magical animals, isn't solely driven by monetary gain. They actually have other purposes. especially when it comes to powerful magical creatures with precious bloodlines and rare species. I am certain that the Silver Spear will not sell them at will. The Thunderbird must still be in their hands, and they will be carefully raising it, waiting for it to fully grow. Other purposes? Anduin looked at Newt with surprise. Could there be other unknown secrets within this organization? He recalled that when he was fighting with the Silver Spear member code-named Thunderbird, the man had hinted at other intentions for hunting magical animals. That's right. Newt nodded. I don't know all the details, and it's not convenient for me to tell you now, but this is the judgment made by the Order of Merlin. If you can join the Order someday, we will explain it to you in detail. The Order of Merlin? Are you referring to the members who have received the Order of Merlin? Anduin knew about this. The Order of Merlin is considered the highest honor in the wizarding world. Even Minister Budnor had planned to use a Medal of the Order of Merlin, 3rd class, to encourage him to strive for an award at the International Congress of Alchemy. Yes and no, Newt nodded, then shook his head decisively. The Order of Merlin is an honor that symbolizes the contribution of the honored wizard to the wizarding world. Generally speaking, individuals who make contributions to our knowledge reserve or entertainment will have the opportunity to receive a 3rd-class medal. The 2nd-class medal is used to recognize people who have beyond ordinary achievements or efforts. The 1st-class medal requires magical outstanding acts of bravery or outstanding achievements, which is a very high affirmation. However, these medals only represent honor. The Order of Merlin is real. Although the members of the Order of Merlin have basically been awarded medals, it does not mean that every wizard who has the Order of Merlin is a member of the group. Newt explained a lot of complicated concepts about the Order of Merlin, but fortunately, Anduin understood. You mean that those who have medals are not necessarily members of the Order, but the members of the Order have basically been awarded medals, right? Then you are also a member of the Order of Merlin? It was the first time Anduin heard that the so-called Order of Merlin actually existed. He always thought it was a special award to commemorate Merlin. Yes, I, Dumbledore, Minister Budnor, Amelia, and others you know are all members of the Order. The purpose of the Order is to maintain the peaceful coexistence of wizards and muggles and reduce conflicts and tensions, Newt explained with a smile. Theoretically, such a group should be a secret organization. Is it really okay for you to disclose this information and the members to me? Anduin felt that Newt seemed to have told him too much. Hey, not all groups are secret organizations. The Order of Merlin is not as mysterious as imagined. Many high-ranking people in the wizarding world are aware of its existence, Newt reassured him. We know of its existence, but we rarely reveal it to the public, Newt said, his mouth curling slightly in a mocking smile. Regarding our attitude towards muggles, there are various opinions in the wizarding world. We just represent one of those positions. Some people wish to package us into a mysterious organization. So, this is a high-end organization, Anduin thought. Ordinary wizards might not even know it exists. Why does it sound more like a rich and powerful peace-loving people's club? Are you really working and you haven't told me yet? Why are you telling me this now? Anduin continued to look at Newt with some doubt. As for why I am telling you all this. Newt's expression turned serious as he looked directly at Anduin. There are 2 reasons. First, the jazz group has been observing you for a long time. Although I don't know much about you personally, Headmaster Dumbledore and Minister Budnor both think highly of you, and I trust their judgment. Even though I haven't asked for your opinion yet, the jazz group has already included you in the list of candidates for membership. Perhaps when you receive your first medal of the Order of Merlin, someone will send you an invitation. Me? Anduin looked at Newt in surprise. No way. Your organization sounds like it wants to save the world. What does that have to do with me? I just want to make a fortune quietly. Don't give me some inexplicable lofty ideals. Is it because the image I usually maintain is too positive, which made you misunderstand something? If I had known, I would have shown my true colors when I did bad things, so I wouldn't be dragged into this. But then Anduin thought, if these guys knew what he had done behind the scenes, he would probably be labeled a perverted scientist and sent to Azkaban. And what Newt means is that this jazz band has been watching me? Could it be Dumbledore? Sure enough, people are always treacherous and slippery. Maybe this old guy hides in a corner to spy on me. Thinking of this, Anduin couldn't help but shiver. However, Newt didn't notice his reaction and continued speaking. Yes, you have shown that you are a young man with a sense of justice and a firm will, and you are also Muggle-born. You are the best candidate to inherit the ideals of Sir Merlin. I believe that in the not-too-distant future, you can carry forward the ideas of Sir Merlin. Newt gave Anduin a very high evaluation and praised him without hesitation. End of this chapter. Chapter 388, The Light of the Righteous Path. Goodness, aren't you putting me on the spot without even asking for my consent? You believe in something without any practical benefit? Anduin thought to himself, feeling a mix of frustration and amusement. Sometimes, pretending to be too perfect can be a real hassle. Despite his internal complaints, Anduin knew he had to maintain his composure. He smiled at Newt, hiding his true feelings. Newt, however, didn't dwell on the topic of Anduin joining the jazz group. After all, Anduin was only a candidate at this point. Instead, Newt shifted the conversation back to the previous topic. As for the other reason I brought up the Order of Merlin, Newt said, his expression serious, it's because this Silver Spear organization has been on our radar for a long time. We've uncovered some secrets about them. Of course, I can't reveal everything to you just yet, Newt continued. But you need to know that finding the young Thunderbird and following it to the Silver Spear's lair is crucial. The current leader of the organization is of great importance to us. We need your help, Anduin. I hope you can assist us in this task. I understand it's dangerous, and we won't force you, but if you accept, we'll provide you with ample support. You won't be facing these villains alone. We just need your help in locating their hideout. Newt's sincerity was evident as he carefully chose the information he could share with Anduin. The leader of the Silver Spears? What's so special about this boss? Anduin wondered. The organization seemed to hold many secrets, making it significant enough to attract the attention of the esteemed Order of Merlin. Despite the danger, Anduin's desire to rid himself of the troublesome Silver Spear and his curiosity about their treasures aligned with this mission. Understood. I'll do my best to help you, Anduin replied earnestly. I can't guarantee the extent of the spiritual connection with the Thunderbird or how long it will take, but if it's possible, I'll assist you in Europe. As soon as he finished speaking, Anduin regretted his sanctimonious tone. What if they misunderstood him again? He feared they might see him as a crime-fighting zealot. I knew I didn't misjudge you, Newt exclaimed, his eyes shining with admiration. Anduin's willingness to help only strengthened Newt's resolve to recruit him into the Order of Merlin. Seeing Newt's expression, Anduin realized he had guessed correctly. It was too late to backtrack now, so he decided to maintain his righteous facade. In their eyes, he was the embodiment of justice. With a silent sigh, Anduin ended the conversation with Newt and bid him farewell. Newt's attitude towards Anduin had become increasingly friendly, even escorting him to the fireplace and inviting him to visit whenever he had time. After a day and night, Anduin returned to his home in Diagon Alley, feeling a bit weary. He walked to the sofa and sat down heavily, still processing the day's events and the information he had gathered. As he settled into the sofa, he felt something odd beneath him. Ow! A pained scream erupted from under him. Startled, Anduin quickly stood up and reached behind him, pulling out Shaltir, who had transformed into a bat. She was writhing in pain. Oh, it hurts so much, my lord! Why didn't you watch where you were sitting? My poor back! Shaltir wailed. Anduin couldn't help but chuckle at the situation, despite feeling a bit guilty. Sorry, Shaltir, I didn't see you there. Are you all right? Shaltir pouted, still in pain but somewhat mollified by Anduin's concern. Just be more careful next time, my lord. Anduin nodded, making a mental note to be more observant in the future. He had a lot to think about and prepare for, but for now he needed to rest and recover from the day's events. Shaltir twisted her body and rubbed her lower back with her fingers. Anduin, with a look of exasperation, stared at her. Is there something wrong with you? Why do you keep drilling into other people's lower bodies? In my opinion, you should be put to death directly. Now quickly turn back into your human form. My lord, I'm injured now. This is a work-related injury. Why do you still want to criticize me? Shaltair complained helplessly. She then jumped off Anduin's palm, transforming back into her human form, appearing as a little girl. Even in this form, she still involuntarily supported her lower back, resembling an old lady with a herniated disc. After a moment, Shaltair managed to calm down and looked around curiously. My lord, is this your home? It doesn't look bad. It's very spacious, except for the ugly furnishings. Of course, it would be great if you could close the curtains during the day, she said with a smile, sitting down on the sofa beside Anduin. Stop talking nonsense, Anduin snapped, glaring at her. It's ugly to open your mouth and shut it up. Don't you know that you are living under my roof now? He thought to himself, feeling speechless. You will live on the 3rd floor from now on. I will arrange a room for you. Kiki and Hog still live here. They might be looking after the store. You will get to know each other later. You should familiarize yourself with the environment here as soon as possible. From now on, without my approval, you can't go out casually. Understand? Anduin said seriously. Yes, my lord, Shaltair replied, feeling a bit helpless at the strict request. Just prepare a coffin for me. I don't need a room with windows. It would be best if I had a basement to live in. The basement? Heh, you won't like it there, Anduin said noncommittally. He then recalled that there was a living body material in his laboratory that he hadn't put away. He wondered if Kiki had helped him clean it up. At that moment, Shaltair stroked her stomach and looked at him with a straight face. My lord, do you have anything to eat? I've been transported for so many days, and my stomach is almost flattened by hunger. I drank the vitality tonic you fed me all in one day and one night. As she spoke, Shaltair kept sniffing the air desperately, as if searching for the smell of food. Suddenly, her expression changed. Strange. Why is there a strange smell here? It's a bit like a werewolf, but it seems different. End of this chapter. Chapter 389, The Vampire and Era. Please recommend a monthly ticket. That's Hog. You'll see him in a while, Anduin said, surprised by Shaltair's keen sense of smell. Can you recognize the scent of a werewolf? Have you encountered one before? The smell of werewolves is unmistakable. How could I not recognize it? Werewolves and vampires are sworn enemies. We've had numerous conflicts with their kind. Those crude beasts dare to call themselves intelligent creatures, Shaltair said with disdain, curling her lips. But my lord, why are there werewolves here? He's not a werewolf, Anduin corrected, shaking his head. He then briefly explained Hog's background to Shaltair. So he's just a wolf cub. My lord, I advise you to avoid contact with these beasts. They might infect you with their stupidity, Shaltair said, clearly looking down on werewolves. Are you teaching me how to do things? Anduin glared at her, noticing that Shaltair had a tendency to talk too much and often appeared detached. No, my lord. I'm just offering some small suggestions. Shaltair quickly reverted to her obedient demeanor upon seeing Anduin's displeased expression. After warning her, Anduin decided to get Shaltair something to eat. He discovered that her diet was not much different from that of humans, except for her occasional craving for blood products. According to Shaltair, she had never tried fresh raw blood because she found it disgusting and considered eating raw food barbaric, which did not align with the image of their Toreador clan. Once Shaltair had eaten her fill, Anduin led her down to the store on the 1st floor. Kiki and Hog were still diligently guarding the store's entrance. Due to the effects of Anduin's All Curses End spell the previous day, the magic on most of the civilian goods had been nullified, and there was no time to re-enchant them. As a result, there weren't many products on the shelves, and the shop looked deserted. Hog, bored, was dragging his head and pawing at the tabletop, while Kiki stood guard conscientiously. When Anduin appeared from the inner door, Hog turned his head excitedly. The store's business was slow today, and he was bored. My lord, you're back. Did you deal with the troublemaker? Hog asked, jumping off the chair at the counter. He then sniffed the air and frowned. What's that strange smell? You stink. Your whole body reeks. Shaltair, who had been hiding behind Anduin, poked her head out and glared at Hog with resentment. She had heard his comment and knew he was referring to her. Who are you, And why are you with the Lord? Hogg asked, taken aback by the girl who had suddenly appeared. This is Shaltir, a vampire. She will be living with us from now on. You two should get to know each other, Anduin said, glaring at Shaltir to keep her quiet. He then briefly explained the events of the previous night and Shaltir's background. Oh, so that bastard got away? That's not okay. We need to find him and tear him to pieces for daring to destroy our home, Hogg said, baring his teeth after hearing Anduin's explanation. I agree, but that guy is strong and elusive. We need to be fully prepared, Anduin said, glancing at the half-empty shelves and narrowing his eyes slightly. Do you have any ideas, my lord? If that guy uses a portkey to escape, your current tracker can't cover all of Europe, Cheeky said worriedly. Thunderbird could be anywhere. Indeed, Anduin replied with a sneer. That's why I'm starting with Azalea. Using her, I can track Thunderbird. He won't abandon her as an insider. So what should we do? Hogg asked, scratching the back of his head with his hind paw. Our current surveillance isn't enough to know if they've contacted Thunderbird. Shaltir giggled, covering her mouth, which earned her a dissatisfied look from Hogg. She pouted in return, glaring at him. Anduin ignored their interaction. Normal surveillance won't cut it anymore. I need to find an opportunity to contact Azalea directly and control her. When will you do it? Cheeky asked, glancing at Hogg and Shaltir, who were still glaring at each other. Tonight, Anduin said quietly, staring ahead. We'll close the shop early today. It will reopen after the lathes finish processing those civilian products. I need your help in the store. With that, Anduin apparated, leaving behind a vampire, a husky, and a house elf. As soon as Anduin disappeared, Hogg turned to Shaltir. I don't know how you convinced the boss to take you in, but since you're here, you need to respect seniority. As a newcomer, you should listen to your seniors. Now call me Master Hogg. Hogg straightened up, looking at Shaltir with a smug expression. Why should I? Shaltir retorted contemptuously. Lord Wilson is the boss here, not you. Why should I recognize a stinky dog like you as a senior? Hey, you dead bat. I've been with the Lord for years. I'm his #1 general. You're just a newcomer who doesn't follow the rules. How dare you talk back to me? Hogg cursed angrily. Why shouldn't I talk back? I don't have to listen to a stinky dog like you. You're a stinky dog, a stupid dog, a stupid dog. Shaltir taunted, like a schoolchild in a playground argument. You dead bat. May you wake up to the sun every morning. Silly dog, how dare you curse me? I'll strip your teeth out one day. Bounce. Bounce your bounce. The rebound is invalid. Cheeky watched the bickering pair, shrugged helplessly, then closed the door and left the scene alone. End of this chapter. Chapter 390, Confronting Azalea. In the evening, Azalea returned home exhausted. She had been busy at the smuggling scene on the coast since yesterday. After accompanying Director Bianca to transport the magical beasts to Scamander's house, she had to return to the Ministry of Magic to handle official duties. The scale of the magical animal smuggling case that happened last night was enormous. It took a lot of effort just to deal with tedious matters such as registration and report writing, and she was busy until late at night before she could leave the Ministry of Magic. Azalea was deeply worried. Now that Thunderbird had disappeared without a trace, what should she do next with her covert mission in the Ministry of Magic? During this period, Thunderbird had not sent her any news. Should the mission continue, be temporarily suspended, or be completely abandoned to return to the headquarters? She didn't dare to send messages to her superior Lance in other clubs at will. If Thunderbird found out, it would be her who was unlucky. But continuing to stay like this was not an option. If the Ministry of Magic discovered her identity, it would be disastrous for her. Azalea sighed helplessly after coming out of her fireplace and stretched her slightly tired body. But before turning on the light, she realized something was wrong. Her perception told her that there was someone in the house, right where Thunderbird had appeared last time. However, after discovering that there was a stranger at home, Azalea's initial emotion was neither anger nor panic, but relief. The person who would appear at her house this evening must be Thunderbird. After all, this guy knew her true identity and had a previous criminal record. Azalea had always hated the sudden appearance of this trick, but now that Thunderbird appeared, she finally breathed a sigh of relief. What she feared most was being abandoned, left to fend for herself in the Ministry of Magic. Fortunately, although this guy ran away, he did not forget her, and now he finally appeared. Azalea immediately turned her head and looked at the shadow not far from her. "How many times have I told you not to show up at my house at random? Why didn't you send me a direct message if you had something to do? What happened on the coast today, and who made you run away?" Although the appearance of Thunderbird made Azalea breathe a sigh of relief, she would not give this guy a good look. Azalea didn't turn on the light after speaking. She didn't want others to see that there were other people in her house, so she just walked quickly towards the shadow. But when she got closer, she realized that the figure in front of her was not Thunderbird at all, but Anduin, who was taking care of magical animals at Scamander's house in the morning. At this time, Anduin was sitting quietly on the sofa in the shadows, looking at Azalea with a smile. "It seems that you don't like strangers suddenly appearing at home, Azalea. I'm sorry for visiting so late," Anduin chuckled, then stood up silently. After discovering that it was someone else who appeared in her home, Azalea was quite frightened and staggered a few steps back involuntarily. You are Anduin. Why did you appear in my house? What did you hear just now?" Azalea's face was very ugly at this time. She still didn't understand why this young man was here, and she had just said a few more words out of carelessness. She didn't know if Anduin had heard them clearly. "Azalea, you know why I'm here, but judging from your reaction just now, you probably don't know where that guy Thunderbird is now, which is a pity," Anduin said, shaking his head regretfully. "Thunderbird? I'm sorry, Mr. Wilson, I don't understand what this means. Are you referring to the Thunderbird we rescued together this morning?" Azalea tried to deflect, her voice trembling slightly. "It is now safely staying at Scamander's house," Anduin said, his voice calm but firm. Azalea's face grew increasingly tense, a sense of dread creeping into her heart. She had an nagging suspicion that this man knew her true identity, but she wasn't entirely sure if he was bluffing. For now, she decided to play dumb. "This is my private domain. I don't know how you got in, but you need to leave immediately," Azalea demanded, her voice filled with indignation. "Azalea," Anduin whispered her name, then sighed and shook his head. "I hate to say this, but your acting skills are quite lacking. I've been very obvious about my intentions. Don't you realize what's happening? Or do you want me to lay out everything you've done? Should I start with you being a spy in the Ministry of Magic for the Silver Spear, or with you stealing from my shop while I was away at night?" As he spoke, Anduin slowly approached Azalea, stepping out of the shadows until the faint moonlight illuminated his face. "You," Azalea gasped. She had initially thought Anduin was trying to trick her or was merely suspicious, but now it was clear he knew everything. Her mind raced as she considered her options. This young man must know her identity, but she had sensed no one else around. He must have come alone. Azalea's thoughts flickered rapidly. If Anduin knew her identity and was alone, he likely intended to capture her himself and then report to the Ministry of Magic. But such a plan was naive. He must be another fool deceived by her appearance. Didn't he know that all Silver Spears were skilled fighters? Now was the perfect opportunity to take him down and use Obliviate to erase his memory, ensuring her identity remained safe and buying her time to escape. With her mind made up, Azalea steadied herself and looked at Anduin. "What exactly do you want?" she asked coolly, her eyes fixed on him, watching his every move. Just as Anduin began to respond, Azalea sprang into action. Chapter 391. You want to fight me up close? As Azalea was about to speak, she noticed Anduin's distraction and quickly pulled out her wand from her waist. With a slight tremble of her wrist, she instantly cast 3 powerful stunning spells at Anduin. It was clear that Azalea employed the multiple spells technique. Knowing that Anduin, as an alchemist, likely had numerous defensive tools, she feared her attack might not fully penetrate his defenses. If she waited for Anduin to react, it could become troublesome. Thus, she moved nimbly, quickly closing the distance between them. Azalea was determined to control Anduin swiftly with her close-quarters spellcasting skills. In her eyes, Anduin was merely a young wizard with some achievements in alchemy, nothing to worry about. Just as she had concluded from her previous discussion with Thunderbird, How powerful could a young man be? So, she acted decisively. As she closed in, the tip of her wand glowed with the paralyzing spell she had prepared. If she could hit him at close range, it would surely incapacitate Anduin instantly. But before she could strike, her right hand, holding the wand, was tightly grasped by Anduin. Anduin didn't even bother to draw his wand. A violent electric current erupted from his body, neutralizing the 3 flying spells with a wave of his hand. As Azalea approached, he sidestepped gracefully, avoiding her wand, and then suddenly raised his hand, grabbing her wrist. "Heh, it's been a long time since anyone chose to fight me up close," Anduin said with a slight smirk. "I didn't expect you to make such a decision, Azalea. I have to say, you really have ideas and a lot of courage." The battle started and ended abruptly. Before Azalea could even register Anduin's movements, she found herself disarmed, her aspen wand taken away by Anduin. "You!" Azalea exclaimed, incredulous. "Could it be you who fought the Thunderbird?" By now, if she hadn't realized the truth, she would be too foolish. Azalea was well aware of her own strength. Her spells were not easily dissolved. Yet, the lightning magic Anduin used effortlessly annihilated her spells, a method she had never encountered before. "It's too late to realize this now," Anduin shook his head. "You dare to attack me? Do you think the people in the Silver Spear are a bunch of reckless fools? Thunderbird was like this, and so were the 4 silver spears who attacked the Scamanders." "The Scamander family? You were the one who got rid of the infiltrating team?" Azalea looked at Anduin, almost in despair. "You didn't even know this? It seems the Ministry of Magic's secrecy work isn't particularly bad," Anduin mused. He had expected Azalea to recognize him after he used the lightning magic, but her ignorance changed his opinion of the Ministry of Magic's effectiveness. But now was not the time for such thoughts. Anduin tightened his grip on her hand, causing Azalea to wail in pain. He then pulled her hand behind her back, and from his cuff, a spirit-binding snake emerged, tightly binding Azalea's hands. After securing her, Anduin took Azalea and disappeared from the spot. When they reappeared, Azalea found herself in a simply decorated room, surrounded by various magical instruments and a whole row of transparent glass cabinets filled with potions. The room was filled with an array of strange instruments and magical materials. In the center stood an upright bedboard, to which a man with a vacant expression was bound. His body was connected to various bizarre metal wires. The scene was unsettling, to say the least. As Anduin led Azalea into the room, her eyes widened in terror. He secured her to a bedboard similar to the one holding the other man. "Anduin, what are you going to do to me? Where is this place? You." Azalea's voice was abruptly silenced as Anduin raised his hand. Her lips seemed to seal together, allowing only muffled mf sounds to escape. With Azalea immobilized, Anduin didn't bother with questions. Instead, he produced a syringe and drew a large vial of blood from her arm. Azalea's eyes widened in panic, but she could only whimper helplessly. 627 magic points? Not as high as Izuran, but impressive for her age, Anduin muttered to himself. He continued his examination, meticulously recording various physiological indicators. He knew that the interrogation would involve certain methods, and it was crucial that Azalea's health was stable to avoid accidentally killing her. After completing the physical examination, Anduin searched Azalea's belongings. He found her space equipment, a leather pocket, and her faceless mask. He conducted all these actions in front of her, methodically and without haste. Azalea watched in horror as Anduin drew her blood, measured her body temperature, checked her heart rate, and even searched her body thoroughly. Yet what terrified her most was Anduin's complete lack of emotion. His face remained impassive, as if he were examining a lifeless object rather than a living, breathing person. This cold indifference shattered Azalea's psychological defenses. She couldn't fathom what awaited her next. Her emotions cycled from fear to confusion, then to anger, back to fear, and finally settled into numbness. Despair filled her heart as she realized the hopelessness of her situation. End of this chapter. Chapter 392, codenamed Unicorn. "Tell me," Anduin said, moving a chair and sitting in front of Azalea. After removing the magic that sealed her mouth, he looked at her with great interest. What do you want to know?" Azalea asked, her voice trembling with fear. She didn't know how much Anduin knew about the club, but she realized it would be hard to escape this situation. Everything, Anduin replied blankly. He glanced at the man next to him, who had a vacant expression, and then looked back at Azalea. Let's start with him. Do you know the person next to you? The person next to me? Azalea repeated, her voice shaking. She took a closer look at the man and then shook her head. I don't know him. I've never seen him before. Why should I know him? His code name is Azeron, Anduin said, his mouth twitching slightly. Your clubmates took 4 sets of jammers from your house and stole them from me. You don't have the slightest impression. Azalea looked at Azeron again, her eyes widening in disbelief. She hadn't expected that the infiltrated team not only failed, but also had one member captured. Realizing that Anduin knew her identity and the whereabouts of the jammers, she asked, You always knew my identity? And you also knew about the jammers? Isn't it obvious? Anduin sneered. Thanks to you taking away my tracking device, I had the opportunity to catch these guys. I should thank you for that. But I didn't expect you to keep a set of jammers on you. Azalea swallowed in horror. Those jammers had been tampered with? The young man in front of her had been monitoring her, and she hadn't noticed it. So, I've always been like a clown in front of you, an actor with poor skills. Since you've arrested me, does that mean I'm no longer useful to you? Are you ready to kill me, like the silver spear next to you? Azalea laughed miserably, tempted, looking at Anduin with a lonely expression. She didn't want to die, especially when she thought about her sister's safety. She couldn't die yet. I'm willing to cooperate with you. As long as you save my life, I can tell you anything you want to know. Azalea struggled to raise her head, looking at Anduin pleadingly. Seeing her sudden change of attitude, Anduin raised his eyebrows in surprise. He had been using legilimency to sense that Azalea had something she desperately wanted, but he was sure it wasn't her own life. It seems you have a lot of secrets, Anduin thought. Is there a goal that makes you willing to risk your life? He kept this question in his heart, knowing it wasn't the most important thing right now. He needed to find out the information he needed most. Okay, Anduin said. The reason I didn't use Veritaserum and legilimency on you like I did with Azeron is that I've seen through long-term observation that you and the Silver Spear are not completely aligned. Don't worry. If you can show your worth, I can give you a way out and even help you accomplish what you most want to do, Anduin promised vaguely. He couldn't fully see Azalea's heart with legilimency from a distance, so he could only hint. Azalea raised her head with excitement. Azalea's face paled with fear when she heard Anduin's words. She stared at him intently, her mind racing. Does he know my secret? How does he know everything? Being cornered by Anduin, Azalea immediately fell into deep self-doubt. Tell me your code name, the purpose of coming to the UK, your mission, and who your accomplices are in the UK, Anduin demanded, giving her no time to think. My code name is Unicorn, Azalea replied, realizing there was no turning back. She couldn't fathom the man in front of her, so she decided to answer straightforwardly. I returned to the UK to cooperate with the headquarters to establish the Silver Spear's stronghold here. The organization places great importance on the clubs in the UK, so they arranged for me to join the Ministry of Magic in advance. In England, the only person I know is Thunderbird. He is my immediate superior and the main person in charge of the Silver Spear's British affairs. He knows my real identity, but I don't know his. My task is to infiltrate the Ministry of Magic, gather information for the club, and fully cooperate with Thunderbird's operations. My usual specific task is to remain hidden and wait for instructions from Thunderbird. Although he is powerful, he is also a very arrogant wizard. Without his permission, I am not allowed to pass information to him at all. Azalea tried to calm herself and answered Anduin's questions intermittently. So far, what information have you provided to the Silver Spear? Anduin asked, knowing that the confidentiality contract on their missions wouldn't be immediately covered, so it was crucial to prioritize these questions. I started working a year ago. Every 1 or 2 months, the club would carry out tentative shipments of goods, which were of little value. On one hand, it was to find a suitable landing place and transportation route, and on the other hand, it was to test the inspection strength of the Ministry of Magic. Before every action, Thunderbird would send me a message to monitor whether the Department of Management and Control of Magical Beasts and the Auror Command had been alerted. By the way, we use a faceless mask to transmit information. It is a very powerful alchemical device that can be used for simple text messaging, Azalea added voluntarily after some thought. Anduin nodded silently, signaling her to continue. He already knew this information, but her willingness to divulge these secrets directly proved Azalea's sincerity in cooperating. End of this chapter. Chapter 393, Transit Station. Seeing that Anduin didn't respond, Azalea felt another chill in her heart. This guy probably knows about the mask. But think about it, since Iseron has fallen into his hands, the mask is naturally inevitable. The young man in front of her is praised by director Bianca and others as the most promising alchemist in the future of the British wizarding world. With a wry smile, Azalea continued, "The operation in the first half of the year went very smoothly. In addition to observing secretly at the Ministry of Magic, I also passed some basic information to Thunderbird, such as the daily duty hours of the Department of Management and Control of Magical Beasts and the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, their shift schedules, usual work content, and so on. By the way, there is one thing that Thunderbird asked me to collect from the very beginning. One is the address of Scamander's house, which I only found out about not long ago, and the other is regular reports on wanted warrants within the UK, both domestic and cross-border. It turns out that the Scamander family is so exposed, but it's no wonder that Newt has always cooperated with the Ministry of Magic. If you want to know, you can find out as long as you are willing to spend time. But why do the Silver Spear, or Thunderbird, pay so much attention to the arrest warrants? Could it be that Thunderbird itself is a wanted criminal abroad? Anduin was a little confused after hearing Azalea's description, but he just kept the matter in his heart and continued to listen to her confession. After conducting tentative transportation for more than half a year, Thunderbird found that there was no leak and was ready to start transporting high-value cargo. And the first operation was to transport a juvenile Thunderbird half a year ago. Originally, this mission went smoothly at the beginning, but they were also unlucky later on. They happened to be discovered by the Aurors in training and were followed and surrounded all the way up. That time was the first time I took the initiative to send an early warning signal to Thunderbird, and finally helped the other party escape the pursuit of the Ministry of Magic. However, although that mission was successfully completed in the end, it also let the Ministry of Magic know of the existence of the club, and the higher-ups of the Ministry of Magic seemed to have some doubts about the interior. The intelligence authority of my first-level secretary was obviously restricted. The next thing is for them to find you and purchase alchemy equipment. The Ministry of Magic obviously improved their tracking level a lot after that purchase. Azalea said this and glanced at Anduin. She discovered that the reason why the club has been suffering from bad luck is that it started after meeting this young man. Oh, since you know that the Ministry of Magic has upgraded its equipment, why would you be surrounded and suppressed in the next operation? Anduin looked at her with a smile, thinking that this Silver Spear was still his own cornucopia. If it wasn't for their own business, it would not go so smoothly. It's not that arrogant Thunderbird, Azalea said, suddenly showing a hateful expression. That idiot has no brains in anything except fighting. He arrogantly thinks that some alchemist items don't affect missions at all. Later, because my secrecy level was downgraded, I couldn't get to know the actions of the Ministry of Magic. As a result, the mission failed. That Thunderbird actually wanted to blame me for all this. Azalea said this, snorting angrily. Then you were instructed by him to steal things from me. The doors in my house are not easy to open, but I don't understand. I have lowered the defense level of the door so much. Why are you so stupid? Have you been using the universal breaking spell to open the door? Anduin teased. Azalea blushed in embarrassment upon realizing that Anduin had been watching her that day. She had foolishly believed she had discovered a weakness in this door. Yes, Thunderbird contacted me immediately after learning that the mission had failed and ordered me to steal the jammer from you that same day. He planned to use the equipment to complete the mission for the Scamander family. But I'm curious, why did they only take away 4 sets of jammers in the end? Was the set in your possession reserved for another purpose? Anduin asked, puzzled, recalling the jammers he had just found in Azalea's space storage device. No. Azalea shook her head. I didn't tell Thunderbird about the set of jammers from the beginning. I kept it to save my own life. At that time, Thunderbird expressed his fear of you and wanted to eliminate you in advance. I tried to persuade him, but it was useless. I also considered warning you, but I didn't dare to betray the club. Anduin nodded. He had noticed this before and had sensed something was off in her superficial thoughts, leading him to believe there was a rift between Azalea and the club. It seemed her sense of loyalty to the Silver Spear was weak from the start. He gestured for her to continue. After I stole the jammer, I went back into hiding. Except for the infiltration team from the Sphinx who came to my residence to retrieve the jammer, Thunderbird never sent me any further instructions. Even this time, I didn't know it was Thunderbird until I arrived at the scene, Azalea sighed. She hadn't expected Thunderbird to be so unreliable. Not only had they lost all the goods, but she had almost been caught. Why do you place so much importance on Britain and insist on establishing a stronghold here? Anduin wondered why they were so determined to transport the goods to this location. The club hopes to establish a cargo transfer station in the UK. On one hand, there are many magical animal resources here, but smuggling them has been very difficult due to the Ministry of Magic's blockade. A werewolf collaborator who had developed here before was inexplicably expelled, so Silver Spear especially wanted to establish a black market here. Azalea explained helplessly. If it weren't for the British side being fortified like an iron fortress by Minister Budnow, they wouldn't have had to intervene personally. Anduin wiped his nose in embarrassment upon hearing Azalea mention this. He seemed to be the one who had destroyed the werewolf black market. In a way, he was partly responsible for Silver Spear's interest in the area. On the other hand, the market in the Americas has developed relatively smoothly, Azalea added lightly. End of this chapter. Chapter 394. The Silver Spear Branch. What does the progress in the Americas have to do with establishing a transfer station in England? Anduin asked Azalea, puzzled. That's because Britain is the closest to the Americas, Azalea replied without hesitation. Currently, the club's transcontinental transportation relies on relatively primitive methods, sea, land, or air. This is why we value that suitcase in the Scamander's possession so much. Because the Americas are so far from the European continent, we need a landing point that's relatively close. Many of our collaborators treat magical animals cruelly, transporting them with injuries. For covert operations, shipping by sea is necessary, but if the distance is too long, we risk losing them halfway. So, we initially chose a landing point in the UK, specifically on the island of Ireland. From there, we can have enough rest time, she continued. Of course, there's another reason. According to some information I accidentally came across in the club, the Silver Spear's control over Northern Europe is weakening. The wizards of the Pure Land Society have taken control of the northern coastal areas of Europe. We have significant conflicts with them, and landing there would be too risky. Pure Land Society? Anduin interjected, recognizing the name. He had heard of this organization, which was similar to the Scavenger group in America. They either advocated the supremacy of pure blood or harbored a deep hatred for Muggles, refusing any contact with them. They were terrorists, much like the Death Eaters. Yes, they're a bunch of lunatics who talk about purifying wizard blood all day. They're keen on studying black magic and curses. They don't reject Muggle-born wizards as much as the Silver Spears do, which makes it harder for us to operate there than in the UK. In the UK, getting caught might mean jail, but in the jurisdiction of the Pure Land Society, getting out alive would be a miracle, Azalea explained. She had almost been assigned to Northern Europe, so she understood the environment well. So, the Silver Spears are relatively gentle for a criminal organization? Anduin asked, amused. He knew the Silver Spears were known for their use of pure violence. In terms of danger, yes, Azalea admitted. When the Silver Spear carries out missions, we try to minimize bloodshed. Of course, there are exceptions, like the Thunderbird group, which are more aggressive. However, since our main goal is business, most branches in Europe follow the principle that peace is paramount. Some branches even engage in legitimate business and cooperate with the local Ministry of Magic. Moreover, the Silver Spear doesn't discriminate based on wizard blood. Whether you're a pure-blood or a half-blood wizard, as long as you join, you're treated equally. This might also be because members don't know each other personally, Azalea sighed. This was one reason she didn't completely reject the Silver Spear. Oh, so the Silver Spear's code of conduct varies by location. Why are the branches in each place so different? Anduin's curiosity about the Silver Spear grew. Yes, you could say that, Azalea nodded. The Silver Spear is divided into two parts, the Silver Spear and the Silver Spear. The Silver Spear is responsible for headquarters affairs, with strict rules and discipline. They maintain the entire headquarters operations. But no one has really seen them, and the so-called headquarters is more of a rumor. I've never been to the headquarters since joining the club, she continued. As for the Silver Spear, I was only receiving my own Silver Spear. That is, when I was receiving the Aspenwood Wand and Mask, I encountered a Silver Spear. I don't even know how many of them there are, or where they are usually active. In short, the Silver Spears are a mysterious group. They only appear when distributing equipment, reviewing, and cashing out rewards, Azalea explained, trying to provide Anduin with what little information she had. Anduin nodded thoughtfully. It seemed that this so-called headquarters was more elusive than he had imagined. Newt had attempted to locate the group by relying on the spiritual connection between him and Thunderbird, but the information they had gathered so far suggested that the situation was more complex. Azalea, lost in her own thoughts, continued. In contrast, the Silver Spear is a team focused on external development, and I am one of them. In continental Europe, for example, we are divided into multiple Silver Spear divisions to handle business. These divisions are generally organized by country. However, there are instances where a branch is responsible for multiple countries. Each branch is typically led by one spear and several short spears. Since the Silver Spear follows an elite route, the number of members is not large. Short spears usually number 1 or 2. In the UK, for instance, there are only Thunderbird and me. We often delegate our daily business to collaborators on the black market, who are our peripheral members. The largest number of members, as far as I know, is under the Sphinx in charge of Egypt. In addition to commanding his local short spear, he also has a special infiltration team. Many tasks, however, must follow the headquarters' directives. There are also instances where various spears are seconded based on their relationships. The mission involving the Scamander family this time was very important and was said to be arranged by the headquarters. However, it ended in complete failure here. The headquarters likely hasn't figured out the situation yet. Azalea sighed again, realizing she had been sighing a lot today. Ever since the club and Anduin became involved, the Silver Spears had faced unprecedented misfortune. They rarely appeared, and when they did, it was usually without significant losses. Yet, in less than a month, 5 members had died, and Azalea wasn't sure if she would survive. Realizing she was getting ahead of herself, she continued. For each branch, the headquarters' jurisdiction is not strict. In fact, it can be said to be almost non-existent. The headquarters only cares about the results and never questions the process. Therefore, each branch can be built according to different spear styles. Some branches, because the headquarters has no demand for magical animals, don't even get involved in the smuggling business at all and operate as legitimate businesses, Azalea explained. End of this chapter. Chapter 395, Past Events. The organizational structure of the Silver Spear resembles that of an ancient vassal state. The headquarters of the Silver Spear collects and allocates resources, while the branches are responsible for opening up markets and regularly sending resources back to the headquarters. The specific operating details of each branch are left to their discretion. After listening to Azalea's explanation, Anduin gained a deeper understanding of this smuggling group. How does the Silver Spear recruit new members? And how much do you know about the members of other branches? Anduin asked. Although he was now familiar with the club, he needed more details to proceed with his plans. I don't know much about the recruitment process, Azalea admitted. New members are usually recommended by existing ones, particularly those with the rank of Lance. These individuals are deeply trusted and have significant experience. While short spears seem to have the authority to recruit newcomers, I've never seen it happen. To join the Silver Spear, there are basic quality requirements, the most important being sufficient personal strength. The Silver Spear still respects the traditions of its origins as a dueling club. During the selection process, dueling tests are prioritized. Many newcomers are former collaborators, so there are many Silver Spears with black market resources. As for the other divisions, I don't know much. I only know that the Egyptian spear is called the Sphinx, the French spear is codenamed Phoenix, and the Italian spear is referred to as Acromantula. I don't know much about the others. Azalea, having resigned herself to her situation, continued to reveal the club's secrets. Her initial unease had gradually given way to a calmer demeanor. "What do you know about the Thunderbird who is in charge of the United Kingdom with you?" Anduin asked, recalling the terrifying blue flames he had encountered. It was the first time he had faced alchemy equipment that could suppress him so thoroughly. "That guy, huh?" Azalea snorted angrily at the mention of Thunderbird. "Strictly speaking, that bastard Thunderbird is not the head of the British branch. He was sent by the headquarters to develop a transfer station." "He's not the head of the British branch?" Anduin raised an eyebrow in surprise. "That's right. Thunderbird doesn't seem to be in charge of any fixed branch. He acts independently, like a general responsible for battlefield operations. He was helping to establish a branch in the Americas before being sent to the UK. He has a great reputation in the club. Most of the Silver Spear members I've met consider him the most powerful. His signature spell is Fierce Fire. He has a bad temper, is arrogant, has a strong desire to control, and is a fanatical duelist. He despises the use of alchemy props in battle, like a stubborn old man from centuries ago." Azalea's resentment towards her old boss was evident as she muttered a few curses under her breath. "So, you didn't know Thunderbird before coming to England. How did you join the Silver Spear, and who recommended you?" Anduin asked, curious about Azalea's background after learning that Thunderbird was a Lone Ranger. "Me?" Azalea hesitated, her tone becoming uncertain, as if she didn't want to divulge too much about herself. "I also know a little about your deeds. Before you went to the European continent, you behaved." Her voice trailed off, leaving Anduin intrigued and eager to learn more about her past. "After returning to England, you suddenly transformed into a man with a silver spear. Clearly, something significant happened during your time in Europe," Anduin remarked, a hint of curiosity playing at the corners of his mouth. Azalea's expression grew increasingly troubled at his words, indicating that the past event he referred to was not a pleasant memory for her. Anduin, however, remained unfazed. "It doesn't matter if you don't want to talk about it, but don't blame me if I resort to using legilimency to read your mind. If I accidentally uncover some of your secrets, protected by a contract, causing you to end up like Izeron, don't hold it against me. We can just forget about our previous transaction." "No, I'll tell you," Azalea responded immediately, her face turning pale with fear. She clearly understood the implications of the Silver Spear contract. "It's true that I didn't know about the Thunderbird before I returned to England. I joined the Silver Spear because I was forced to." Azalea sighed deeply and began to recount her experience. Her family had fled to the European continent to escape the war in the UK. Azalea had just graduated a few years prior, so she moved with them. Although the Roar family was a pure-blood family, they were strongly opposed to the extremist views of the Dark Lord. As a pure-blood family, not supporting the Death Eaters was tantamount to opposition, which led to frequent harassment from them. In fact, many families faced similar situations at that time. Pure-blood families who could not accept the Dark Lord's rule found it dangerous to oppose the Death Eaters, especially when many of their enemies were relatives. Consequently, many small families chose to flee. Azalea's family settled in France. If things had gone as planned, they would have either stayed in France safely or returned to England after Voldemort's downfall. The real trouble, however, lay with Azalea herself. She had always been a very talented witch, but her striking beauty often led to her being underestimated at Hogwarts. This was partly intentional on her part. Because her beauty attracted so much attention, Azalea developed a habit of keeping a low profile, despite her considerable power. After moving to France, Azalea didn't hide her talents. Her youth, beauty, and high level of magical skill quickly made her stand out among the young French wizards. Her prominence in the French wizarding world led her to meet a powerful local witch who admired her greatly. This witch soon became her mentor, establishing a teacher-student relationship with Azalea and teaching her spell dueling skills over a period of time. End of this chapter. Chapter 396, Azalea's Sister. At that time, driven by her natural curiosity about new things, Azalea had no reservations or doubts about learning dueling. She also held great respect for her teacher. It was only later that Azalea discovered her teacher was a prominent figure in the Silver Spear Dueling Club. "So, it was your teacher who approached you first?" Anduin asked, sensing something amiss in her story. "That's right. My teacher noticed my innate talent for magic power perception and couldn't resist mentoring me," Azalea replied, genuinely grateful to her teacher. "What's her name?" Anduin inquired curiously. "Her name is protected by a confidentiality contract, so I can't disclose it. However, her code name in the Silver Spear is Wicked Bird," Azalea explained, shaking her head. Anduin nodded thoughtfully and gestured for Azalea to continue. "After studying with my teacher for about 6 months, she revealed the existence of the Silver Spear to me and offered to recommend me for membership," Azalea sighed. "And did you join?" Anduin asked, sensing there was more to the story. "No, I refused," Azalea said, shaking her head. "I was only interested in dueling. When my teacher introduced the club, she hinted that it had other objectives beyond dueling. I wasn't interested in those, so I declined, but promised to keep her secret." "Oh? Then why did you change your mind?" Anduin asked. "It was because of my sister Anais," Azalea said, her expression turning sorrowful. "After I declined the invitation, my teacher gradually faded from my life. Not long after, my sister fell ill with dragonpox. She was only 10 years old. Despite treatment at the local magical hospital, her condition didn't improve. She was my only sister, and I was desperate." "And then your teacher appeared, coincidentally?" Anduin asked tentatively. "Sort of, but not entirely. My teacher had once told me that I could seek her help if I ever faced trouble. Desperate, I reached out to her, and to my surprise, she had a solution," Azalea said, her mood stabilizing. "She could cure dragonpox? Although Gunhilda of Gorsamore invented a cure, it's not perfect. If even the hospital couldn't help, how could she?" Anduin asked, skeptical. "But the results spoke for themselves," Azalea said, shaking her head helplessly. "The teacher's potion improved Anais' condition, and the rash gradually subsided. However, the teacher later told me that while she could curb the dragonpox, she couldn't completely cure it. Anais would need to take the potion regularly, which was obtained through the club's merit system. But the club's merits are precious, and she couldn't help me indefinitely. So, she invited me again, hoping I would join the Silver Spear to earn merits and exchange them for the potion." "So you agreed?" Anduin asked, frowning as he pieced together the situation. "Yes. The Silver Spear's resources are impressive. They found a way to manage dragonpox, but it requires regular doses of the potion. Most of my achievements in the Silver Spear were used to help Anais," Azalea said, sighing helplessly. "And did your teacher kindly tell you afterward that you could work at Silver Spear with peace of mind, and that she would take good care of Anais?" Anduin asked, his tone laced with irony. "Take care of your sister for you? Could it be that your sister is still in her hands until now? Let's go," Anduin sneered, adding to her thoughts. "How do you know?" Azalea looked up at Anduin in surprise. She wasn't a fool, and quickly realized what Anduin was implying. Her expression changed immediately. "You mean all of this is a trap designed by the teacher? That's impossible." "Oh, why do you think this is impossible?" Anduin grinned playfully. "You must know that my sister is indeed infected with dragonpox. The teacher has no way of deciding who can be infected with this disease, so your assumption is not realistic at all," Azalea argued. "Really? Then I'll show you this." Anduin smiled and took out a metal-bound magic book. He turned to the page titled The Curse of Dragonpox and placed it in front of Azalea. "This This is a curse? Azalea murmured, dumbfounded as she read the magical instructions Anduin showed her. Yes, this kind of curse can cause a person to inexplicably contract dragonpox, and it is nearly impossible to cure with normal treatment methods. Presumably, the treatments at the magic hospital have been ineffective for your sister, and this is the reason why, Anduin explained. But speaking of it, the cost of casting this dragonpox curse is not low. Oh no, it doesn't seem to be troublesome for the silver spear, because the saliva and tooth powder of the Peruvian venomous dragon needed to cast the curse are not cheap in your club. Certainly not less, Anduin added with a smile as he took back the magic book. But why would they go to such lengths to deal with me? I'm just an ordinary witch. Azalea still couldn't accept this fact. A young witch whose dueling ability meets the club's selection criteria, and because she has a handle, her loyalty is unquestionable. She is also pretty. Most importantly, you have a complete British background, making it absolutely impossible for you to return to the British wizarding world without suspicion. I guess when your teacher contacted you, the mysterious man had just fallen. Anduin guided Azalea step by step with his voice. You mean, since then, Silver Spear has planned to expand its branch in the UK. And I am the spy they selected early on? That is to say, the purpose of the teacher's contact with me at the beginning was to have me return to England to be the internal response for the Silver Spear. Azalea suddenly became enlightened, her thoughts now clear and logical. End of this chapter. Chapter 397, Durmstrang, Seeking Monthly Ticket Recommendation. You're not stupid. It seems that Silver Spear is very determined to establish a transfer station in the UK. They actually laid the groundwork early on, even recruiting a Silver Spear specifically for this purpose, Anduin remarked, looking at Silver Spear with a mix of admiration and concern. The foresight to plan so many years in advance was indeed impressive. That's over, my sister. She is still with my teacher, Azalea suddenly exclaimed, her face turning pale as she realized the implications. According to you, your sister should be over 11 years old. Doesn't she have to go to a magic school? Anduin asked, puzzled. He knew that young wizards needed formal schooling not just to learn magic, but also to stabilize the magic within their bodies. Almost no wizarding families chose to educate their children at home for this reason. No, she is indeed at a magic school now, Azalea replied anxiously. But my teacher is with her. Just 1 year after I joined the Silver Spear, Anais was already of age to attend school. At that time, my teacher was assigned by the Silver Spear to go to Northern Europe to try to establish a secret branch, she explained. The environment in Northern Europe was very harsh, and there was basically no living space for the Silver Spear. The headquarters only required my teacher to take root there, and if possible, gather some resources. They planned to take me there, but due to the rapid progress of the American branch, the schedule for establishing the British transit station was advanced, and I was arranged to return to the UK. My teacher's disguised identity in Northern Europe is that of a professor at the Durmstrang School of Magic, Azalea continued. My sister originally planned to attend Beauxbatons nearby or return to Hogwarts in England. As long as she had a supply of potions every few months, her disease could be kept in check. But my teacher suggested that Anais should go to school at Durmstrang, claiming she could take care of her for me. I didn't think much about it and agreed. Now my sister is living under the same roof as that vicious woman. Oh my God, this is terrible. Azalea's voice trembled with emotion, and tears streamed down her face. She hated herself for being so naive and easily deceived. She teaches at Durmstrang? Anduin was slightly taken aback. What a coincidence, he thought. He also had someone teaching at Durmstrang. According to recent contacts, Karkaroff was doing quite well there. If things continued as they were, this coward might even become the headmaster in a few years. Don't worry. Your teacher won't harm your sister if she doesn't know that you betrayed the Silver Spear. She might even take extra care of your sister to gain your trust, so you don't need to worry too much. Anduin comforted her, analyzing the situation. Azalea realized that Anduin's analysis made sense and gradually calmed down. Tell me, what subject does your teacher teach at Durmstrang? You can't say her name, but it should be fine to mention her subject. My teacher is very skilled in potions, Azalea replied, trying to be as specific as she could without revealing too much. Understood, Anduin nodded. He planned to contact Karkaroff later to confirm the identity of the Silver Spear member who had infiltrated the academy. Then he turned to Azalea again. I can help with your sister's situation. You saw the content in the magic book earlier. I have a way to remove the curse of dragonpox. At the same time, your teacher, I can help you get rid of it, but there's a condition. I'm willing to listen, Azalea said without hesitation. As long as you can save my sister, I'll do anything. Azalea looked at Anduin in despair. She knew that her only hope now lay with the young man before her. Initially, she believed that working hard for the Silver Spear would secure her sister's health. But now, she realized it was all a trap set by the club, and she had been unknowingly grateful to those who had framed her. The irony was bitter. After hearing Azalea's story, Anduin understood that she had severed ties with the Silver Spear. He nodded calmly. All right, if that's the case, you'll be mine from now on. But I'm warning you, you need to be completely loyal to me, or I won't be kind. Anduin then took out a bracelet similar to the one he had given Shaltir and placed it on Azalea's wrist. He also produced a metal pill. Open your mouth and swallow this. Azalea swallowed the pill without much hesitation. She felt it take root in her stomach, knowing there was no turning back. Even if Anduin was a devil, she had no choice but to follow him, even if it meant destroying the world together. After completing this, Anduin waved his hand, unfastening the belt that bound Azalea. He handed her a pendant. This is equipment that can protect against mental intrusion and can automatically generate the iron armor curse. As a reward for your loyalty, you can give it to your sister. At least it will give you some peace of mind. The tactical boots you sent last time are heading to Northern Europe, so they must be for your sister too. Azalea felt a mix of warmth and coldness in her heart. Had Anduin noticed her when she bought those 3 pairs of tactical boots from him? Could he track them? Where were the boots now? Swallowing hard, Azalea nodded her thanks and looked at Anduin again. What do you need me to do for you? Just keep doing what you're supposed to do and be a qualified spy, Anduin replied with a slight smile. The bracelet on your wrist functions like a mask and can transmit information to me. If Thunderbird or the Silver Spear contacts you, pass the information to me immediately. Yes, my lord, Azalea nodded silently. But now that Thunderbird has disappeared, even I can't find him. The transmission range of the mask is limited. I tried to send him a message before, but there was no response. I suspect he has left the British mainland. You don't need to worry about that. He is no longer in the UK. Just follow my orders and leave the rest to me, Anduin said with a slight smile before apparating out of the laboratory. End of this chapter. Chapter 398. Sirius Black? After Anduin sent Azalea back to her residence, he gave her some additional instructions. Azalea's acting skills were amateurish at best, so Anduin didn't have high expectations for her role. He just hoped she could help locate Thunderbird's heart. The next day, a group of high-ranking officials from the Ministry of Magic invited Anduin to their headquarters. They wanted to understand what had happened at the scene and to discuss the purchase of alchemy props. Minister Budnor had promised that if Anduin helped find the whereabouts of the Silver Spear, they would increase their equipment purchases. The outcome was better than expected. Anduin not only led the ministry to the opponent, but also helped complete the siege almost perfectly. Anduin, I heard about your decision from Mr. Scamander. On behalf of Sir Merlin, I thank you for your great help, Minister Budnor said, looking at Anduin with satisfaction. This meeting was more intimate than usual, with only Minister Budnor, Anduin, and Amelia present. You are too kind, Minister. It is my duty to fight against evil, and their existence threatens my safety as well, Anduin replied politely. By the way, I have set up an alert system. If I detect any reappearance of Thunderbird, I will notify the Ministry immediately. They likely have the Mentos technology in their hands. You must be cautious. You've seen the damage Thunderbird can cause, Anduin added. Minister Budnor nodded and exchanged a wry smile with Amelia. Speaking of this, we may need your help again, Amelia said. The Ministry's monitoring circle was originally able to detect portkeys, but we shut it down after the situation stabilized. Now, due to disrepair, it can no longer function properly. Dumbledore helped arrange the magic circle before, and we would like you to see if there's a way to repair it. There aren't many alchemists left in the UK who can maintain such a large alchemy circle, and hiring people from Egypt is too costly. Dumbledore is quite busy, so... Minister Budnor trailed off. So you want me to work for you? Anduin thought, feeling a bit exasperated. The ministry wanted to save money and face, not wanting to show their weakness. But outwardly, he maintained a cooperative demeanor. No problem. To be honest, I haven't seen a national-level alchemy circle like the ministry's, and it would be an eye-opener. However, since I have never worked with it, I can't guarantee success. That's understandable. You should try it first. If it doesn't work, we'll find another way. Shall we go now? Minister Budnor suggested, standing up. Of course, if you can repair this large alchemy circle, we will compensate you and hire you as the ministry's alchemy consultant for future maintenance, Minister Budnor added. Anduin was thrilled. This was a great opportunity to study the ministry's alchemy circle openly and get paid for it. It was a win-win situation. Minister Budnor was indeed a kind person. Thank you for your kindness, Anduin said, feeling genuinely grateful. But this time, I will help you, but I would like to ask for 2 favors, Anduin said. What's the matter? Minister Badenoch asked, raising his eyebrows. First of all, the ghoul-calling bag that was seized from the battle scene that day. Can you lend it to me for study? Anduin revealed his intention. That alchemy item? Minister Badenoch exchanged glances with Amelia, who then took over the conversation. That's a very evil and dangerous black magic alchemy item. Why do you want to research it? Amelia asked. After retrieving the item, they had stored it in the Department of Mysteries. Such black magic equipment was highly destructive and classified as super dangerous. They were hesitant to hand it over to Anduin without understanding his purpose. It is precisely because of its danger that we need to find countermeasures, Anduin explained with a slight smile. No one can be sure that there isn't another silver spear hidden within this equipment. If we can find its weakness through research, we can reduce future losses. It's like studying counterspells. If we encounter dangerous things and simply bury them, we remain ignorant. When we face them again, we still won't know anything about them. After hearing Anduin's explanation, Minister Badenoch considered for a moment before nodding decisively. Okay, but the entire research process must be completed within the Ministry of Magic. The item must not be taken away, and our people must be on site to monitor. The research results must also be shared with us. These are reasonable conditions, and I have no problem with them, Anduin agreed. Sharing results? Even if I give them to you, can you really understand them? He thought to himself with a smirk. What's the other favor? Is it also about alchemy items? We've already determined the purchase terms, and with your new tactical map and security gate, we have a significant budget allocated, Amelia said warily. The Ministry of Magic had spent nearly 1,000 galleons, but the equipment Anduin provided was truly impressive. The 2 high-level executives, who initially intended to make compensatory purchases, ended up buying more than planned. They acquired not only tactical equipment, but also a lot of civilian gear. Amelia even secretly purchased a top-end magic phonograph for her office, and the minister's office also received one. As for the second matter, it doesn't involve any money. It's actually a simple task for the Ministry of Magic, Anduin chuckled. It's about Sirius Black. Sirius Black? Minister Badenoch's expression turned serious upon hearing the name. He looked at Anduin sharply. Why did you suddenly mention him? He was the traitor who indirectly caused the deaths of the Potters and betrayed the Order of the Phoenix. I advise you not to get involved with him, Badenoch said coldly. Have her. Chapter 399, Budnor's Support. Amelia, standing nearby, looked at Anduin seriously and added, I've heard from my brother about your relationship with Sirius, but his situation has already been settled. It's not something to be taken lightly. Anduin noticed the serious attitudes of both Amelia and Minister Budnor. He understood the gravity of Sirius's situation, but still addressed them earnestly. As far as I know, Sirius was never given a proper trial after his arrest. The conclusions reached by the Ministry of Magic were based on assumptions made after the fact. From the information I gathered from the Death Eaters, Sirius had no contact with them in the year before Lily was killed. He was being hunted by mysterious individuals every day. Isn't it too arbitrary to make such a blind judgment? Anduin questioned. You mean there's more to the story? Minister Budnor lowered his head, recalling past events, then shook his head. Although Sirius did not receive a formal trial, he never denied his actions. It wasn't that we were unwilling to give him a trial. He refused any contact. Whenever someone approached him, Sirius would go mad, making communication impossible. Given the circumstances at the time, his betrayal seemed certain. Everyone despised him deeply. Sending him to Azkaban was the only option. Lily and James had many friends in the Ministry of Magic who might have attacked him otherwise, Budnor said, reflecting on the situation with sadness. That's right, Amelia agreed. Although I hadn't taken over the law enforcement department then, both civilian wizards and families wanted swift and severe action. It was what the public demanded. Amelia then looked at Anduin curiously. By the way, you mentioned you got this information from the Death Eaters. Where did it come from? Anduin frowned, realizing he had never disclosed his secret activities of hunting Death Eaters. Let's not discuss that, he deflected. Minister Budnor glanced at Amelia, signaling her to drop the subject. We don't need to delve into your sources, but if you want to revisit Sirius's case, you need stronger evidence. Otherwise, there's no point in discussing it further. Can we at least have a new trial for him? It's not difficult for the wizarding world to determine if someone is lying or even to know their thoughts, Anduin insisted. But in the wizarding world, altering memories is not difficult, Amelia countered. He was captured directly at the scene. Neither he nor anyone else had the chance to tamper with his memories, Anduin argued. Even if you prove he might be innocent, how can you convince the wizarding world? Sirius's arrest was what the public wanted. We've classified him as the most dangerous prisoner. You can't change that with just a few words. His situation is more complicated than you can imagine, Amelia explained, looking at Budnor for confirmation. Minister Budnor nodded slightly. What do you mean? Even if he pleads not guilty and undergoes a memory test? Anduin asked, starting to grasp the complexity of the situation. If you don't have irrefutable evidence, you can't convince the Wizengamot. Sirius is a repeat offender who indirectly affected the course of history, Minister Budnor said with a sigh. Amelia nodded and reiterated, the justice of Sirius is what the people want. We've classified him as the most dangerous prisoner. You can't change that with just a few words. His situation is more complicated than you can imagine. It took a lot of effort to regain confidence and stability. Upon hearing this, Anduin understood the implications of what the two officials were saying. The Wizengamot and the wizarding world needed a resolution regarding Sirius Black that would be acceptable to all wizards. The actual truth had become secondary. It seemed that the Wizengamot had already reached a consensus, including both pure-blood and half-blood wizards. Therefore, even if Anduin could convince the two Ministry of Magic executives in front of him, it might still be difficult to change the outcome. But what if it turns out that Sirius is truly innocent? What if there's more to the story? Anduin asked, his eyes burning with determination. No one could tell what was going on in his mind. Seeing Anduin's stubbornness, Amelia shook her head helplessly. However, Minister Budnor's reaction surprised her. If you can really prove all this, Minister Budnor said after a moment of consideration, looking at Anduin firmly, then I am willing to stand by your side. Minister Budnor, Amelia exclaimed, taken aback. She stared blankly at the resolute middle-aged woman beside her. Justice is justice. There are no additional conditions, Minister Budnor said resolutely, then turned to Anduin. But the premise of all this is to prove his innocence with facts. Otherwise, there is nothing to discuss. And the first step is whether you can get Sirius to talk. He has refused to communicate with anyone since entering Azkaban. Not even Dumbledore could get him to speak. Dumbledore also went to see Sirius? Anduin asked, surprised. That's right. You are not the only one who was suspicious of what happened back then. Dumbledore may not have believed Sirius was innocent, but he wanted to know what really happened, Minister Budnor explained with a sigh. But Sirius didn't even acknowledge Dumbledore. At the time, we thought it was Black's guilt and remorse. So, if you can learn everything that happened from him, it would be invaluable. If you can truly prove his innocence, I am willing to negotiate with the Wizengamot and the Order of Merlin to ensure he gets the fairness he deserves. Minister Budnor declared loudly, expressing her determination. I understand. Please arrange it as soon as possible. I will find a way to uncover the truth from Sirius. If I discover that he truly deserved his punishment, I promise I will not advocate for him again, Anduin assured them sincerely, feeling buoyed by Minister Budnor's support. End of this chapter. Chapter 400, The Alchemy Room of the Ministry of Magic. At the scene, Anduin received Minister Budnor's consent and a promise to arrange for him to visit Azkaban in a week. With that settled, the three of them left the minister's office together, as they still had business to attend to. Their destination was the Department of Magical Accidents and Disasters, the division within the Ministry of Magic responsible for monitoring the magical activities across the British wizarding world. This department housed various monitoring circles that could detect any spellcasting behavior in the UK. While these circles could only determine the location and general strength of the spells, they were also tasked with monitoring Zongxi and supervising the spellcasting behavior of minors. The employees in this department were among the busiest in the ministry, second only to the Aurors. They dealt with major accidents and disasters caused by magic, handling everything from memory cancellation and driving away muggles to restoring scenes. Aurors like Moody often teased them, calling them cleaners, because their job was essentially to clean up magical messes. Despite the perception that their work was less critical than the life-and-death responsibilities of Aurors, Anduin saw immense value in this department. He believed it combined the functions of police dispatching and firefighting, though the Ministry of Magic had not fully developed its potential. The department was treated as a marginal post under the Reversal of Accidental Magical Events team, with minimal staffing and resources, often just a single wizard on temporary duty to prevent the monitoring circle from malfunctioning. To Anduin, this was reckless. When he saw the alchemy room housing the monitoring circle, accompanied by Minister Budnor, Amelia, and Fudge, the director of the Department of Magical Accidents and Disasters, he realized this room was the most valuable on the third basement floor. The alchemy room appeared simple at first glance. The floor and surrounding walls were made of natural, unpolished dark marble. It was a circular room, roughly the size of a basketball court. Around the center of the room were layers of short steps leading up to a central black pillar, as thick as two people hugging each other. From a distance, it was difficult to identify the material of the pillar, which connected to the ground and extended straight into the 10-meter-high ceiling. Anduin could see that the pillar was more than 10 meters long, as it was a different color from the ceiling, indicating it led to higher places. The pillar, connected to the raised ground, resembled an enlarged version of a suona, or perhaps a toilet plunger. Anduin shook off these whimsical thoughts and focused on the task at hand. Ignoring the senior officials of the Ministry of Magic around him, he slowly squatted down and gently stroked the ground with his hands, as if caressing the body of a beautiful girl. To ordinary wizards, this might seem like just a stone house with a broken pillar in the middle, but to Anduin, this room was more enchanting than the ornate main hall of the Ministry of Magic. He could clearly perceive faint waves of magic slowly gathering from the floor and walls, converging on the pillar along the circular staircase, and then shooting straight out through the ceiling. Absorbing and storing the remaining magic power in the Ministry of Magic, the energy was then transformed into a detection spell through the complex runes on the ground. The pillar where the spell was finally channeled acted as an amplifier, allowing the spell to cover the entire UK. So, this entire alchemy room, including the ground and walls, is part of the magic circle? Anduin muttered to himself as he rubbed the ground. His eyes lit up as if he had discovered something significant. He immediately took out the magnifying glass he carried with him and closely examined the floor. What? The materials used to engrave the runes on the ground are all fairy Ulim steel? This is too extravagant. Teh. But isn't Ulim steel known for its superior magical properties? No, this isn't just Ulim steel. It's mixed with mithril. and judging by the reaction of the magic circulation, it might even be refined mithril. Initially, Anduin was shocked by the complex design of the rune circle and magic circle. However, upon closer inspection, he found the materials used to construct the magic circle even more astonishing. He made a rough calculation. Based on the density of the runes inscribed here, the entire floor and walls, excluding the central pillars, would require at least 20 pounds of ulam steel and 5 pounds of refined mithril. These two materials are top-grade magical metals that Anduin couldn't afford, and the materials used in the magic circle alone were worth more than his entire net worth. Seeing this, Anduin couldn't help but swallow hard. He was tempted to pry the materials off the ground and take them away, guessing that the 3 senior officials behind him might not notice. But he quickly suppressed his impulse, realizing it wasn't worth the risk. Anduin soon understood the value of the room before him and why such luxurious materials were used to create the magic circle. The primary purpose of using ulam steel was to ensure long-term durability, allowing the magic circle to operate 24/7 without failure. This setup could support the continuous operation of the magic circle by relying on the stored magic power, making it energy efficient and environmentally friendly, albeit extremely expensive. While Anduin admired the magic circle, the 3 senior officials of the Ministry of Magic exchanged puzzled glances. Why did Anduin lie on the ground as soon as he entered the room? Fudge cast a questioning look at Secretary Budnor. Unable to hold back after receiving Fudge's questioning look, Minister Budnor took the initiative to ask, "Anduin, did you find anything? Can you start the inspection of the magic circle?" Interrupted by Budnor's voice, Anduin got up, wiped the drool from his mouth, and looked at them with some confusion. "I'm checking the magic circle. What's the problem? But isn't our division's monitoring circle over there?" Fudge pointed to the large pillar in the center of the room. End of this chapter.